I am Becky Settle-Rains. I attended the lab school from 1958 to 1967 and actually was one of the first students to enter the brand new building.
Yes. I was another student that entered the first year in 1958. I was in four-year-old nursery school, and I was able to attend all 11 years here at the lab school from 1958 to 1969 in four-year-old nursery school through the ninth grade.
And I might add that in 1967, when I graduated early in May because of the brown recluse spiders. We were let out like early May. The building was taken over, especially I think under the swimming pool area possibly, by brown recluse spiders, so it was not safe for the students to be here.
So they ended up closing the school about 3 weeks early, and we just had an early summer vacation while they took care of the problem.
We did not have a formal graduation.
Yeah, the lab school was basically another elementary school in Charleston. However, it was operated and run through Eastern Illinois University as actually kind of a progressive school where the staff here were university staff, professors, and they were elementary teachers as well. And so we were able to take advantage of, as students, probably outstanding teachers. You know, I call them master teachers these days, and all kinds of new pedagogies and materials and things that were just really top of the line.
Okay. And as a former educator, and you know, I look back now, the curriculum at the lab school was very progressive, as Kevin just indicated. And if you were to look at the new Common Core standards that have been adopted by probably 47 of our states, the lab school was right on target, starting in 1958.
You know, one of the other components or purposes of the lab school was for research, and the state had some of these throughout the state, one being here at Eastern, and so they would again have an opportunity to try new teaching techniques, a new curriculum, and actually do the research to find out the effects of that. As I was going to school, I didn't really realize it, but when I look back, it was really a huge benefit for me as I was growing up. I became a teacher, and as I was going through the education program here at Eastern as a college student, I actually came back to do some observations here at the lab school, and kind of at that time really kind of understood, you know, what the lab school was about and the advantages that we had. And one of the things, of course, was to me that was so wonderful was the way that the teachers always engaged us in the learning process. And as I'm thinking about some of the things that stick in my mind, I remember catching field mice out in the field and bringing them back into the classroom, observing them and letting them go. Or we had the microscopes and we were dissecting paramecium, or had the water trays and we were counting waves. But we were always doing something hands-on, which really helped us learn what we were studying a lot better. And so that's kind of the whole idea about the lab school, is that it was always on the cutting edge. We always had, equipment that was state of the art. We always had experiences that seemed to be, again, better than what the public schools had at that time.
And I think as I reflect on the hands-on, Mrs. Saunders in third grade, we were studying Navajo Indians, and she had probably 24 huge looms. We each had our own loom. We wove rugs, and always hands-on, making connections to what we were studying. I think one of the highlights was the summer school program, which being a student, I was only offered that program every other year as space was limited. but it was an enrichment program, and as part of that program, we spent, I think it was maybe 1 to 2 weeks at Fox Ridge State Park here in Charleston, and we, science, art, across the curriculum. It was an awesome experience that it was just like going on vacation. And then as a college student coming back and working in the classroom, junior block and student teaching, it was sort of neat because as an elementary student, we were always challenged to be innovative and creative. The teachers that worked with us in the lab school as student teachers, once again, challenged the student teachers to be creative and innovative and to challenge the students and use new ideas.
And I think, Becky, just a little bit follow-up on that still was, as a retired educator and school administrator, I look back and I only wish I could have provided the opportunities to, my students that we had here at the lab school. When I think of what made it such a wonderful experience, we had art teachers and home ec, French, we had a swimming pool, we had PE specialists, we had media specialists, we had everything that really provided for a totally well-rounded education. And the way that they were integrated together, by the time I got into junior high, they were doing some really creative things with in the humanities, where whatever we were studying in, for example, in social studies, it may have been in the Revolutionary War era, we would do art projects that were tied in with that, or in they would do something. They would create something in industrial arts, or make foods that were revolutionary period. And so again, when I think back how long ago that was, to have these ideas and to put those forth at that time was extremely progressive.
And as a girl, when I entered 7th grade, I was given 1/4 of industrial arts, which probably at that time, that was not proper for a girl. I mean, at that time. But we were very fortunate because during our 7th grade year, we actually spent 1/4 in industrial arts, 1/4 in home ec, and 1/4 in art. And so we were given actually it was living skills on, how to cook, how to sew, how to nail, and lifelong skills.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have several fond memories of attending the lab school. When I was in junior high, I had an opportunity to run for student council vice president, and that was really a neat experience because we went through the whole campaigning process, and I remember the election, and then actually felt empowered once we were in office that the faculty would listen to us, and that we had some say-so in some things. But it seemed like there were always opportunities. Some of the fond memories were the dances that we held, the sock hops, and the sporting events. Always, it was neat when it was our turn to start the swimming program again. But our teachers were just always so, I don't know what I want to say, but they were like welcoming our ideas and our learning styles. That it was just, they were always thinking of some way to help us learn, I guess, the best we could.
One of my fond memories, I unfortunately didn't have Dale Downs as a 5th grade teacher. However, he came after I had advanced through the grades. But when I came back to work on my master's degree, he was my advisor. So it was nice, to be able to work with him in both capacities.
Well, I think the lab school obviously prepared me well for not only high school, but for life. But going from the lab school in 9th grade to the Charleston High School was somewhat of a transition, because we were known as the lab rats, or other things by the other school students. I was fortunate. I played a lot of summer baseball, so a lot of the students or the kids that I played summer baseball with didn't go to the lab school. And through church, I knew a lot of other children. But you know, we took our ribbing as we moved over to the Charleston High School. My class, however, was softened somewhat because the year that we went through ninth grade at the lab school, and it just happened that the grade class I was in, they extended the public schools here in Charleston to a middle school that went through ninth grade. So actually everyone in my grade went to the high school as a sophomore. Now, I think, Becky, you had a different experience when you went from the lab school to high school, though.
Yes, I went from the lab school to the high school my sophomore year, and the students that were already at the high school, of course, started there as freshmen. I really don't think there was that, as far as socially, I don't think there was that big of a transition. I think maybe the one component that, when I reflect back, is that you did not have necessarily the one-on-one interaction with teacher-student ratio. I think that was a big difference. And probably the hands-on learning was different as well.
Well, I think there was a difference when we transitioned from our freshman or our ninth grade year going into the high school. It appeared to me that the high school, and Charleston High School was a very good high school, and again, I think prepared me very well for life. But it was more of a traditional school, I guess you might say. It appeared that when we were here at the lab school, there was a lot of teamwork with the faculty, integrating units, sharing things back and forth. At the high school, we'd go to our biology class, and then it didn't seem like there was much, I don't want to say integration or even between the departments. And yeah, so.
And I think at the lab school, we did a lot of cooperative learning. Mm-hmm. And we did a lot of where students would work in small groups. And I think at the high school, it was more traditional. I can think of one teacher, well, actually two, in the history department at the high school that really focused on cooperative learning. And I think that was an asset to the lab school, that we worked together, we learned from each other, and we're challenged to do so.